Day two of a 3-day conference. Um, you always hear the cliche of without referees, you can't play a hockey game, but that is the truth. And if analytics are going to make our hockey players better, I think we should also be looking at the referees and the system to make the best decisions. Andreas, stage is yours.
Thank you, Mike. Morning, everybody. So today on the officiating bit, that's, like Mike said, a super important part of a very competitive game. And then, as with other aspects, I think there's a little bit too much of a silo mentality where we need everybody in the space to make the game better. And of course, officiating, as we know, super important. As far as what they have on the support on the technology side, it's really not a level playing field, or at least when we look back and look at the processes, then there's really a lot of resources for those guys than for us, but it's the same game and we kind of have the same requirements for them as we have for the team. So project we have been on a couple of years now in Switzerland is really trying to level the playing field, or that won't be possible, but kind of get closer toward that. All right, so the agenda is we're going to go through basically the value proposition, look at what a process would have looked like before and how it is currently. We look at a couple of problems, differentiation within the officiating on the linesperson side and the head official side, and then how we try to improve the situation. Then a little bit of an outlook on how we think that we can further benefit further down the road. So if we look at our model here for the player evaluation, and without going into any detail here, then we have a lot here. We have a dense data set on every player, and we can analyze their strengths and weaknesses. We can look at the video with that. So there's a lot to develop your player in comparison to other players and in league comparison and everything else. And the officials, they need to be developed as well. So they typically start at the lower levels, and then they will have some sort of coaching with their coaches, with their managers that will watch their games. But really hard to do that when, I mean, we're looking at the professional level here, and up until, you know, now even the officials, they drive to the game. So we're lucky we're in Switzerland, so that's small distances, but it's still easily 2 to 3 hours to just drive to the game. Then you referee the game, then you drive home, and then basically, you know, get home, maybe do it right then or do it in the morning, then manually look at your game, create the video tags, and then discuss them with your coach or with your manager the day after. And as we know on the team side, that's not how this works. Then we have live feedback. The game is debriefed right after the game. Our next opponent is debriefed right after the game. So that's a big difference. Yet, as we all know, after a game, there were a couple of missed calls, or maybe consequential missed calls. Then the discussion is a lot about the officiating. Okay, so if we look at the process before and after, we quickly looked at, sorry, going the wrong direction here. We quickly looked at how it looked like before and how we tried to improve it. There's an important distinction, obviously, just as with the teams as well. A lot less resources at the lower levels in the junior leagues. And then we tried to benefit from the process, or, you know, cameras like Speedio or auto cameras that really make the junior game and the amateur level much more accessible, which again is really an important training ground for the officials that at some point want to be officials at the pro level. So we went through again the process, the before, and, you know, at the junior level, we have this first tier where we try to help, where basically all the penalty and the goals are tagged, and then there's a virtual game clock, and that might not sound like a lot, but for those guys, that's with talking with those guys and what makes your life easier. Typically, the officials, they have some moments in mind in the game. So if they have a virtual game clock, that's already helping them a lot. And then if they have all the penalties tagged, they can browse through those with a couple of clicks rather than having to go through the whole game. At the pro level, then we have more resources, we have a denser schedule, and we have more data that we want to have available right after the game for those guys. So we add the offsides and the icings to it, but then also the close calls or the potential penalties, the close offsides or the debatable offsides. As we'll encounter, as we all know, not all, or let's say the calls are not 100% conclusive a lot of times. So we'll get into more detail a little bit later on, but it's really about how can we get from 70 to 80, how can we get to 90%, and how can we improve this? Then an important piece, as I showed you on the data cockpit, every player has a landing page. So now we have a landing page for every official. So that's for them to review all their games, but that's also, of course, for their coaches to look at those games, to create reports, and then to look at the history and the development of the official as well, much like they would do with a player. So if you go a little bit more into the details here or the complexities, then we distinguish with on some situations. So the easiest ones are the offsides. So basically, it's pretty black and white. We have an offside or not an offside. There's the odd situation where on the video, the frame from one frame to another one, it is inconclusive, but that's less than 1% of the cases. So overwhelmingly, we can say with certainty it is an offside. It's not an offside. The few ones or the 1% or less that is inconclusive, no big deal. We get to 99% fairly easily, and we have great value. Look at a couple of situations. That's not rocket science here, but basically here we see, okay, that was a close situation. So we look back, and then we want to look at this maybe frame by frame. And then we see, okay, now maybe the puck has crossed the line. Maybe here the player is still onside, so it's conclusive, right? Same situation, similar situation. You get the picture. Icing's a little bit more complex. So we have obviously the clear situations where it's an icing, it's from far away, the player skating to the puck with the team that did not do the icing is much closer to the puck. That's very easy. But we do have some inconclusive or even debatable situations. And as you can anticipate, that's going to be much tougher than with the penalties. So our goal cannot be to kind of come in and be 100% right on every situation here. But what we can help the officials with is isolate those situations that are close and that are debatable, with then the goal to have a discussion about those situations, have some consistency with those situations, how we want to handle those. But again, icing's one trickier than the offsides. So we look at a situation here where there's an icing, and then, of course, the player in black feels like he was going to clearly be first to the puck. The officials blew it down. And again, I don't think there's a right or wrong here. It's just how can we kind of consistently look at those situations in order to then improve going forward. Another situation that's like, even on the video side, so white says the blue touched it, the refs didn't see it that way, blew it down. Again, this is not going to be solvable with video. So that's just something that we're going to have to live with. Even if you look at it from different angles, there's many situations where in fact you're just not going to determine whether the blue player touched the puck here or not. So again, we're going to have to live with cases, and in the case of icings, it's more than just 1% where it's just inconclusive. Then penalties, as we can imagine, a lot more tricky. So we have the obvious ones. They make a smaller portion. Then there's like the inconclusive ones, as everywhere. And then there's a lot of debatable. And then here with the debatable, there's not even a clear opinion. So should a referee follow the game flow? Should he have like a feeling for the game and kind of set a standard at the start? And then because of how the game goes, does the rule book change a little bit? A lot of GMs complain there's a different rule book in place apparently during playoffs. I mean, those are all things you hear in those conversations. But think it the other way around. If you apply every stick to a hand as an automatic 2-minute, I mean, that's hard as well. Then what we see is some teams play a lot closer to the edge than others. So they're constantly talking with the officials, they're constantly talking to the league. They always say they're disadvantaged or something. But there's always going to be those players and they're trying to really play at the limit here. And there's other teams that they would just want to bring their penalty minutes down. So the coaches will tell them, stick on the ice, stick to stick, and let's not take chances. Again, a bigger discussion here. But the point again is for us to isolate those situations so then we can get those with an easy access. And we can then talk about, okay, what's a hook and what is not a hook, or what's a tripping penalty, what is not a tripping penalty. So what we agreed on is basically we have this assessment of correct or wrong, but a lot of that is unspecified because that's really up to them and it's up to the league ultimately, and the league in the exchange with the teams that define this. So here we have a few situations that are non-calls on the ice, but I mean here it's if the referee makes this call, then I don't think that's a wrong call, right? So it's consequential. So White is attacking right after the play, yet the player was going for the puck. So to me, would be on the side of a penalty, but you can't say the officiating was terrible if they don't call it. Next situation. So basically, 16 White, pretty unintentional touch, I would argue here. So right now he touches him. I don't think 7 in red is really seeking a penalty here. It just so happens. But again, it's consequential because now it's not red in possession, but it's White going the other way, right? So again, here, it's not up to us to say this is a penalty, this is not a penalty. It's about isolating those situations systematically, make them accessible, and give it in the hands of the leagues, of the officials, of the teams to discuss this and try to improve. Another example here, not called, 6-on-5, just a few seconds to play. So I think that might be a typical example. So it's maybe, too little to call it in this situation, but what about if that's like, I don't know, 10 minutes in, 0-0, then maybe that's going to be called. So do we want that? Do we want to go with the game flow, or do we want to be 100% consistent? Those are not easy questions, okay? Looking ahead and what we think will be the further benefits here is, we already have this efficient access, but then what we're doing right now is generating data sets. And then we want to see, okay, on the team level, for the teams, is this penalties that they take more often, or in which situations. And then also, as far as the officials go, so every call is assigned to an official. Does he have a tendency to call a specific situation more often than others? What about the game flow? Is it very or heavily influenced with score states? Then across leagues, what are the ratios, and how is it called? Do we have a restraining penalty problem or something like that? So the goal is the discussion, have transparency in the process, and then ultimately, of course, improve officiating and kind of eliminate this controversy, and just, work toward, high integrity, where everybody knows the process, everybody knows what we're looking at here, and then be able, based on the data, to kind of see, okay, do we have some trends that we don't like, some problems and inconsistencies, like we discussed, to then communicate with all the stakeholders that are involved, because again, the teams, they define how they want to play, and that's their competitive advantage. With the officials, the process is quite different. It's the teams and the league and the federation and the International Ice Hockey Federation ultimately are all in exchange on how to do this. Basically, they're all one team, and they try to find the ways to have this the best way possible, the most uniform way possible. All right. I don't know, Mike, should I do the Q&A? Yeah.
Why can't we put a tracker on the referees?
For a second.
Why can't we put a tracker on the referees?
Well, I think 100% we can put a tracker on the referee.
Because then it would be able to pick out situations, and tagging would become a much easier situation.
Yeah, so we already do some positional data on them, but I mean, the positioning of the referee is an important aspect that certainly would be boosted with some industry providers, that they, just the athletic side of it, but then also the positional data on them, where they are when. That would be important.
One of the things that would be an interesting thing to see would be, I mean, when I look at referees and they're in motion and are trying to make a call, it's more difficult than when they're standing and have the view of the whole ice.
Sure.
And seeing if when is the call made? Is it made while I'm in? I mean, I actually don't blow the whistle often. They often stop before they blow the whistle. However, am I in motion when something happens over there, trying to get out of the way or something, and then I don't have the same angle? And a tracker, I would think, would be also a way for them to realize, where are you on the ice, which I know that they always talk with their coaching staffs afterwards. Position, viewpoints, angles. And that's something that the referees always end up in a discussion with.
Right. So to this point, I mean, so anywhere ref is tangled up in the play somehow. So we want to make that accessible, but then also when there's like scrums between players, how they manage players and how they communicate with coaches. So any of those situations, we always want to have available, because again, that's what they asked us. They kind of want to see the decision they made, but also how they communicated and how they managed the players and the coaches in those situations.
Now, you showed your application for players. Should we have the same thing for the referees?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's where we want to get to, where it just helps, the data helps to develop those officials and understand kind of maybe where their weaknesses and strengths are in their development.
Tim?
Thanks. It's very interesting. In the discussion about different types of calls, there were sort of two categories that I was confused by. One was inconclusive and the other one was debatable. And so I'm trying to understand, is there a reason for those two? They sound the same to me.
Right. So inconclusive refer to when the video image is not conclusive. So it's like one frame, the puck and the players are onside, and then the next frame, they're both in the offensive zone.
Got it. So I can see how that applies for offside, but maybe penalties seems maybe a little less so, or a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, one, it's a super interesting project for me as an ex-player, because I was not an ex referee. I think the one great thing they do in Switzerland is if you want to become a coach, you're going to have to referee a few games at the junior level. And you see those great players hesitant with their whistle and kind of not know what to do. So the officials tell me that when they review a penalty, normally they watch it in real speed first, and then after they watch it like in a frame by frame situation. But even then, or even at the player safety level, you can't really know what the player is doing, thinking in which moment. And then also with the penalties, sometimes the video footage is inconclusive. It's to a lesser degree than with the offsides, but it does happen where you look at the image, you look at it in 10 angles, and it's still kind of inconclusive. That's specifically like with major penalties, if you kind of you don't want to make that call like you're doing. And then obviously the debatable one is really big on the penalty side.
And then a quick follow-up, do you think teams might want to use this to have a more formal scouting report on referees?
Yeah.
So, this guy puts a, when it's a tight game, the whistle's in the pocket, go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never heard that before, but that's a new.
But that's exactly the discussion. I mean, I think we've come a long way where coaches lashing out at officials is a rarer event than it used to be. Coaches talking in the media about not being happy with the officiating, that's not very often, because the understanding that we're in this together and it's our product has improved a lot, right? But with everything that we do, it's like we talk to the officials, here's what we can do, and then it's like, yeah, but we don't want the teams to see that. And then I say, yeah, I understand that, but I think ultimately the potential is that we understand each other much better. I'll give you maybe one example on this is in Switzerland, everybody was a little bit surprised when the officials in their in-game review on the broadcast, you can hear them talk to each other. And they didn't like that at all at first, but the results were quite good because you can actually hear their reasoning, and they're not idiots. They're making some really acute observations in there, and it helped overall. Sometimes they make a wrong call in the moment and it backfires, but I think all in all, the more transparency, the more communication, the better the relationship with the two. So I see the concern where the teams kind of want to use it against the officials, but again, the ambition is to be more transparent, be more open, and communicate to one another.
A non-relevant piece of information, but sorry to say, Swedish ice hockey has not done a great job of not discussing referees in the media. This past season was a tough year for referees and coaches for different reasons, but it was a very mass, or was out in the media with discussions going on. And then you end up with the discussion, how are we going to stop this? We have to fine them. I mean, make them pay 3,000 euros, 4,000 euros if they're talking, because it was not a good year for us.
Right, but I think so that's another good example. I mean, we had this one game, the playoffs as well in Switzerland, where they made a call and a lot of people disagreed with it, and it was very consequential. But then it's kind of okay. Did that make the difference? So that's like hard discussion to make. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people say if we get one coach's challenge wrong, then that costs us the playoffs. But it's really depends on the way you look at it. And it's like maybe it's the 52 games that you played that, like things or tends to even out. Like sometimes you'll be on the receiving end, and sometimes you get lucky with a call like that. But again, the focus sometimes is just disproportionate in my view.
I agree. And athletics means that the referee may be right or wrong sometimes. That happens.
Wait a second.
Athletics has the inbuilt part of that a referee may be right or wrong in a different situation. That's life.
100%. And we'll never get to 100%. I mean, that was a super important learning piece for me. I mean, I knew it wasn't possible to get to 100%, but it's really about how can we improve and at what costs, as with any other things.
Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you.
5 minute stand up, shake your legs, everybody use the bathroom, and you one and all of them can change to put their computers on.